Hello, my name is George Greenwood, and I'm the CEO for the Kelowna Chamber of Commerce. And it's my honor to introduce today's All Candidates Forum for the Electoral District of Kelowna. At the Kelowna Chamber of Commerce, we deeply value our relationships with Indigenous communities and are committed to walking alongside them on the journey of truth and reconciliation. We recognize the importance of honoring the history, culture, and ongoing contributions of Indigenous people in the Okanagan and across Canada. As part of our continued efforts to build meaningful and respectful relationships, we take time during our gatherings to reflect on the land acknowledgement. We would like to begin by acknowledging that the land which we are gathered is the traditional, ancestral, and unceded territory of the Syilx Okanagan people. We acknowledge their rich history and culture and thank them for the opportunity to live, work, and play on their lands. As everyone can understand, hosting these types of events does cost money. We rely on amazing members and sponsors for their support. The sponsor of today's event is the Association of Interior Realtors. Here to speak on behalf of the association today is Vice President of the Board of Directors, Ryan Main. Ryan, come on up.
Well, it's fairly bright up here. Good evening, everyone. My name is Ryan Main, Vice President of the Association of Interior Realtors. Thank you, everyone, for being here tonight, and thank you to the Kelowna Chamber for allowing us to partner on this event this evening. The Association of Interior Realtors represents 2,600 professional realtors from across the interior of the province, many of which reside here in the beautiful city of Kelowna. Our members care about the community, they live and work and are in the community to a strong, healthy, and well-functioning housing sector, not only in the interior, but across the country. Housing and real estate issues have been top of mind in Canada for some time, and this election is no different. To that end, the Association has outlined 3 priorities to address at the federal level. 1, amend the foreign buyers ban to better meet the needs of interior communities. The federal foreign buyers ban has unintended and damaging consequences for communities in BC Interior. The ban fails to distinguish between urban residential areas and recreational destinations, has created turmoil in the market. We need to correct course, recognize the unique roles of communities with high levels of tourism, and implement targeted exemptions for resort areas and recreational properties. 2, fix financing for manufactured home parks. Despite disputes regarding the 1097 lending form has made it difficult for individuals to buy and sell manufactured homes. To ensure manufactured housing remains attainable and affordable, government needs to establish clear guidelines around manufactured home lending and the forms and regulations that govern it. 3, review and reform federal taxes. Taxes and fees make up a considerable portion of the home's purchase price. To better facilitate the affordable home building we need to consider a review of the entire tax burden to residential properties, including GST, the underused housing tax, development cost charges, etc. We are excited tonight to hear directly from the candidates on the number of pressing topics facing our community. Once again, thank you all for coming and enjoy the forum.
Thank you, Ryan, and the Association of Interior Realtors for your continued support. We're happy to have you here this evening with us. Next, it's my privilege to introduce you to President Derek Gratz, Associate Director, University Industry Liaison with UBCO. Derek.
Thank you, George. It's a pleasure to be here. First off, one of my main jobs is to make sure we thank the Chamber staff. Thank you for all the hard work for putting together this really important event. It's amazing to see democracy at work. This is great. So we all know that elections are the cornerstone of democracy, and that having the opportunity to elect our own leaders and put all that forward is not something we should take lightly. So all these people are putting forward their candidacy to be accountable to you, so this is a great chance for us to hear from them directly. To the candidates, we're thrilled that you've taken the time, one, to put your names forward and actually participate actively in democracy. We really thank you for that. And we're nonpartisan about this. We don't have anybody else, but I think you're all winners for the effort that you're putting forward on our behalf as part of this system. My next job is to introduce our moderator. So Kent Molgat is a broadcaster who you probably know from many different things here in the interior. He started his career 39 years ago on radio in Grand Prairie. I think he came out to Vernon next and was on CJIB. You might know him from lots of years on Global TV, CHBC here in Kelowna. There we go. And from there, he worked for the Interior Bureau as the bureau chief for CTV News for British Columbia. And then many of you would know him now from his work with Kelowna Now. And Kent has really made it his goal to help voters during every part of the election cycle by providing video interviews with every willing candidate at all the municipal, provincial, and federal levels. So please join me in welcoming Kent Molgat.
Thank you, Derek, and thank you, everybody. So glad to see you here tonight. And I want to have a special thanks to the candidates who just went through all of this at another forum, a couple of hours of getting grilled, and here they are stepping up for us to go through it all over again. So questions have been submitted ahead of time. We won't be taking any questions from the floor, but we hope the questions we have will give you a full view of the candidates that we have to make our decisions from tonight. So what we're going to begin with is opening statements. But first I want to introduce our candidates a little more in case you're not familiar with them. Trevor McAleese is immediately to my right. He is a video game developer with a degree in business administration. He has a keen interest in politics and has experience working behind the scenes with the local electoral district of the NDP. And this is his first time in the role of candidate representing the New Democratic Party. Representing the Liberal Party of Canada, Stephen Fuhr is returning to politics after representing the riding of Kelowna Lake Country for 4 years, from 2015 until 2019. He's a decorated pilot who spent 20 years in the Royal Canadian Air Force, where he retired with the rank of Major. Stephen Fuhr for the Liberals. And in the middle, Tracy Gray. She enters this race as an incumbent, having been elected twice in the former riding of Kelowna Lake Country. She was first elected in 2019. Prior to that, Tracy was a Kelowna City Councillor. She is an entrepreneur with a background in the wine and beverage and retail business. Tracy Gray. So throughout the evening, we have a clock that you can't see that reads 2 minutes at the moment. The candidates, and we'll be giving different periods of time as we go through the evening, have 2 minutes for an opening statement right now. We've drawn names to see who goes first. So for their opening statement first, for the New Democratic Party, Trevor McAleese, 2 minutes.
Thank you so much, everyone, for taking the time out of your evening to come and participate in this forum. It's the only way for us to have a functioning democracy is for us to participate. And it's an honor to be able to address you this evening and share a little about myself, our platform, and to get things started here, to build off of the bio that was so graciously provided by Kent Molgat. I am a lifelong resident of the Okanagan. My family moved here when I was only 4 years old, back in the bygone age of 1990. And I grew up here, I've studied here, and I've built a career here using the skills that I gained as a graduate of the Okanagan School of Business. Now, I've had the privilege of working in many of the key industries that this community is built on. You know, over the years, I mean, I've worked in the restaurant industry, like hospitality, you know, things as down and dirty as dishwashing, as custodial services. You know, I've worked in agriculture. I've picked fruit, you know, I've packed fruit. I've worked in packing houses, I've picked ice wine grapes, all of it, you know. And I've been an educator at the same school that I graduated from. I've among other things, I put together tech-based summer day camps for children and had the distinct honor of seeing children gain the same sort of skills that I am now able to put into practice in my career as a video game developer. Now, really, I think that Kelowna has an amazing opportunity to become a hub for entertainment media production, and we can do so much more with our agriculture in this city. And I think that the NDP, as a party that is looking out for hardworking people and marginalized people, I want to make sure that these opportunities are things that we can all share in. Because all of us, we have something to offer. And I'm looking forward to offering you something this evening. Thank you.
Terrific. Thank you. Tracy, you have 2 minutes for an opening statement. Actually, Tracy, I should have laid this down before, but we do prefer that you stay seated.
Okay. We stand in the House of Commons, so I'll, no
I'm
worries.
sorry. I'm sorry.
We'll,
Thank you.
We'll put this down. No worries at all. Hello, everyone. I'm Tracy Gray. It's been an honor to serve the community since 2019. And yes, I did have a career in the beverage industry, 27 years in the BC wine and beer industry, of which I had Discover Wine. Some of you may have shopped there. I was really proud to own that business for 13 years. It was the #1 BC VQA wine store. We also had artisan cheeses and many other giftware and really promoted local artisan products. I originally ran to be on City Council in 2014 to be a voice of small business. And then I, as you know, was elected in 2019 for the role of Member of Parliament. And during my time there, I've had the privilege of holding 4 different shadow ministry roles, all on the economic side, and also most recently was Vice Chair of the Human Resources Committee. And during my time, there's been a number of funding that has come through Kelowna, approximately $160 million, of which just a couple of items include $18 million for the airport, over $2 million for Reaching Home, over $2 million for infrastructure on Leithhead and Ethel, Duck Lake Industrial Park, over $2 million, $800,000 to KF Arrow, and many other. And but what I hear the most about from residents when I'm out door knocking, and I door knock year round, is that there's a couple of items that I hear the most: affordability, crime, and mental health and addiction. And I'm sure that we'll deal with some of these issues here today. My approach is to be really active and engaged in the community. I've held numerous roundtables. The most recent was on housing, where there was a number of local experts from within the community here, and I brought those issues and voices forth. I've been actively involved in policy development for the Conservative Caucus and have led the Conservative Caucus on legislation that has come forth. It's been an honor to serve, and I look forward to your questions this evening.
Stephen Fuhr, your opening statement.
Thank you very much. Again, thank you for coming. My name is Stephen Fuhr. I was also a member of Parliament here in Kelowna from 2015 to 2019. And one of my other duties when I was in Ottawa is I chaired the Standing Committee of National Defence. I think, coming back into politics, many people have said, well, they say this every election, it's the most consequential election that we face. I think this actually might be the time that that's true. It's an all-hands-on-deck moment for the country right now. I would say the United States. Donald Trump is waging economic warfare with Canada. And they're actually hurting their own economy faster than they're threatening ours. The ballot question that I'm hearing on the doorstep every single day at the top of the ticket is who is best positioned to lead us through the situation with the United States, because everything that we care about day to day, all our kitchen table stuff, all the stuff that we really value, and it might be different for everybody here, will be affected if our economy gets into trouble or goes into a deep recession because the United States is leaning on us. There's 2 people now that are going to be on the table or choice for who is best to deal with this. Mark Carney, who recently entered the race, is a crisis manager and a world-renowned economist. He has been critically acclaimed by both Conservative and Liberal governments. He helped us get through the 2008 financial crisis. He's helped Britain through Brexit. And he is uniquely qualified for this moment. And just comparing to what else is on offer, it's not even close. It is critically important that we get Mark Carney into the Prime Minister's seat, and he leads us through this turmoil we're having with the United States. People often say all politics is local, and I too was very successful bringing infrastructure money to Kelowna. I guess coincidentally, also $160 million, and I'd like to do that again in the fastest-growing municipality in the country. Thank you.
I just want to thank all the candidates for never making me have to tell them that time's up, because I was wondering how I could do that politely. For this first tranche of questions, what we're going to do is give a question to our first speaker. They'll have 1.5 minutes to respond. Following that, the other two will have 1 minute to reply either to the question or what they've just heard from their opponent in this contest. So we'll start at the far end of the table. You're all warmed up now, Stephen? Our first question is this. Taxes and fees make up a considerable portion of housing costs across the country. If elected, will you commit to reducing and eliminating housing-related taxes and fees?
Thank you for the question. I happen to know how much those are because my house burned down in the fire in 2023. So when I get a bill for a $26,000 building permit, it's alarming. Fees related to building housing are very, very high. I won't have time to go through Mark Carney's complete housing plan, but he is going to put forward a housing plan that's something that was modeled after the Second World War in terms of magnitude, which includes money, federal lands, and trying to get taxes and fees down, work with the provinces and the municipalities to try and get those fees down. It's a massive problem. It does add a ton of money to the bottom line. It's always passed down to the customer. The part about the housing plan that Mark Carney has is it's going to provide housing for all different types of folks. People that need affordable housing, people that can maybe benefit from a GST cut on a $1 million home. So everybody will have an opportunity to participate in this, but I do agree with you wholeheartedly that we have to get those fees down, for sure.
Terrific, thank you. Now, Tracy Gray, would you like to rebut or speak to the issue?
Well, I'll just speak to the issue. Thanks. So during the time of the Liberal government over the last 10 years, housing costs have doubled. Housing costs have doubled, rents have doubled, mortgage payments have doubled, and the amount of time that it takes to save for the average home is now 25 years for a young adult. And so during this time, we have seen high taxes, we've seen lots of red tape and lots of bureaucracy. I was actually just sitting on the excuse me, on the committee that is housing, and we heard testimony over and over and over again from experts across the country that high taxes and red tape and bureaucracy are actually holding back housing. So on this specifically, we believe that we should be incentivizing cities to bring down their costs, their taxes, and we would actually pair that to match with a GST reduction. We want to incentivize cities. We want to build homes, not bureaucracy. We've also said that we would remove GST on new homes sold, which would add $100,000 to reduction to a first-time homebuyer buying a home. This is a substantive difference between us and the Liberals. We want to put money in Canadians as opposed to in bureaucracies.
Thank you. And Trevor McAleese.
Sure. I'll speak to the question, if I may. So there are many factors at play as far as housing affordability is concerned, and certainly taxes and fees do play a big part. Now, one thing I do want to also point out is that for existing homeowners, as property values continue to skyrocket, I mean, as much as people like to see the value of their asset increase, I know that's for someone like my father who lives on a fixed income, that property taxes, of course, being connected to these sky-high housing prices, this is putting a real burden on his ability to be able to make ends meet on a year-to-year basis. Now, I think in the interests of trying to achieve some kind of a balance here, to not only allow people to protect the equity in their homes, but also to allow first-time homeowners to have an easier time getting into the market, what we are proposing as the NDP is a program to allow first-time home buyers to have low-interest mortgages paired with an aggressive plan to build affordable housing units on public land that we would establish viable sites for by taking in opinions from all relevant stakeholders, municipalities, First Nations bands, find places that we can build high-density homes that people can actually afford.
Terrific. All right, so there goes question one. Now, question number two starts with you, Tracy. What specific measures would you advocate for to support Kelowna's small businesses and local entrepreneurs?
Well, thank you for that question, and I formerly was the Shadow Minister for Small Business, which was a real honor. And of course, being a former small business owner myself, I've had to make payroll. You know, and what I lived through, for those of you that recall my business of Discover Wines, I lived through a scenario where the provincial government made a policy difference that dramatically affected my business. And I had to go through a scenario of selling the rights of my license and closing and laying off a lot of people. And I tell you this story because this, to me, this is why government legislation and policy is so serious to me. Even the slightest change can affect a business. So on small businesses, we hear over and over again that there is regulatory burden, there is red tape, and high taxes. Small businesses have been paying the carbon tax in their small businesses, and we know that on top of that, they were paying GST. And so for years and years, this was a cost that they incurred. Right now, one of the things that we're looking at doing that we've announced is to remove the excise escalator tax, which would help wineries, breweries, cideries, and distilleries, bringing the tax down to 2017 levels. Because the way that it is right now is the taxes automatically increase every April 1st. It trickles down to restaurants and it trickles down to consumers. So there's just one example of how we're going to lower taxes for many small businesses in our region here, in addition to keeping the carbon tax off, and in addition to removing regulatory red tape.
Terrific, thank you. Trevor, it's now your opportunity to speak to the question or rebut what you've just heard.
Sure. Well, as a small business owner and entrepreneur, I have personally navigated many of the systems that are currently in place for acquiring financing to achieve some amount of startup capital, and also government grants that are available for startups as well. Now, I think that we have the possibility here of being able to direct entrepreneurs like myself towards these programs to basically organize them into some kind of a package to make things a little more easy to navigate. Because these programs, especially ones that are favoring the development of sustainable and social enterprises, these are valuable things that actually will contribute to our community in much more valuable ways by keeping wealth here as opposed to funneling it out of the communities and sending it elsewhere. Now, what I will say about trying to take a bit of the burden off of small businesses is that the NDP wants to impose a 1% cap on merchant fees for credit cards. Now, any small business owner knows that if someone pays with the credit card, you are taking a chunk out of their revenue.
Terrific, thank you, Trevor. Stephen.
Thank you. I think it's just reminding that when the Liberals got elected, or I got elected back in 2015, there was a commitment to lower small business tax, which we did, and it went from 11% to 9%. And the government before that, the Harper government, had talked about this many times and never actually did anything about it. So I'd like to start there by just reminding everybody that the Liberals did cut small business tax. There is no more carbon tax. It was talked about in an earlier debate this morning or this afternoon. No more consumer carbon tax, to be clear. So that should give some relief to everybody and small businesses as well. There is a tax cut for just everybody who's paying taxes, so that's going to be helpful. And in a backwards kind of way, small businesses that hire people that usually offer benefits, we have a dental care program now that wouldn't have to be subsidized or built out by a small business because it's offered by the government. And we'll probably talk about benefits later, but it's important that benefits are part of a compensation package.
Terrific, thank you. On time as well. All right, now we're moving on to our third question. This time, Trevor, you get to kick it off. The question is this: what support will you provide for the tearing down of all interprovincial trade barriers?
Well, I actually had the opportunity to meet with the Honourable Diana Gibson, who is the BC Minister of Jobs, Economic Development and Innovation, and had a chance to speak to her at some length about this very topic. Now, the province, the BC NDP, are hard at work in collaboration with the rest of the country to figure out ways in which we can achieve some amount of consensus in trade barriers. Now, one of the most obvious being trucking standards that should and could be shared between provinces to allow shipments to be able to move across interprovincial and interterritorial borders without having to, say, unload the truck, get the weight down, put it back on, change things like height clearances and what have you. This is like a very obvious way that we can encourage the transport of goods across our country. Now, a big part of this also is ensuring that we have mobility of labor across our country. We want to have a a system in which our highly skilled people are able to find employment all over this country, regardless of where you're trained. And I think with all of these things in mind, there is a lot of work that we can do to foster our domestic supply for domestic demand, because that really is what I think is going to get this country through in the face of this trade war that has cut off our largest trading partner.
Terrific, thank you. Stephen Fuhr.
Thanks. Thank you, Ken. We have tried this before, and it's very difficult because all the premiers have to agree, and they just typically don't. When you get them all in the room, it's, they look at it as a win-lose thing, and those types of conversations usually don't end well, and that's why it hasn't happened. Mark Carney has said a couple times that Canada can give itself much more than anyone can take away, and this is a great example of that. They have a plan to have this dealt with by July 1st. That is going to make things a lot easier for us here in Canada, and we're the masters of our own domain in this, so it's just a function of getting it done. We have to do it out of necessity, so I'm sure it's not going to be easy, but the premiers are going to get into the room, and Carney, the federal government, will facilitate that. I'll leave it at that, I think.
Terrific, thanks. Okay, so now we move on. Oh, Tracy, your chance to rebut.
Great, thank you very much, Kent. This was actually my first shadow ministry role when once I got elected, and so I've done a fair amount of work on this. The Liberal record for interprovincial trade is incredibly dismal. Over the years, they did a CTFA, a Canada Free Trade Agreement with the provinces. However, the agreement has more than 100 pages of exemptions, and so there was a lot of photo ops and a lot of promises, and yet very, very little action. As well, the office that was opened, the benchmarks on their office included how many meetings they would have. And so there's been a lot of promises made by the Liberal government on this and very, very little action. And so there's not a lot of confidence that they would be able to move forward on this. It's estimated that there's $200 billion sitting on the table right now because of interprovincial trade barriers. We absolutely need federal leadership in this, and this is something that we're committed to do. Thank you.
Terrific, thank you. Now, we do appreciate applause. As long as we keep it positive, audience reaction is nice. So we'll move on to our next question, and Trevor, you can kick this one off. How do we secure Canada's national and economic security?
Well, we can start by protecting our national interests from foreign ownership. That is, I think, a big part of this, especially because it's no secret that the Trump administration has its eye on our water, on our precious, rare earth minerals. These are things that currently we have invited foreign investment into. This is, if anything, a way for us to shore up our sovereignty, is to make sure that we are, in fact, wholly owning the extraction and the processing and the sale of our own resources. Because if we don't control our own natural resources, we don't exactly have much of a country. I mean, this is, for better or for worse, a resource economy. And for far too long, we have been permitting the export of unprocessed resources out of this country. And now, by focusing on value-added processing, for instance, of our lumber, this is something that's going to strengthen our economy, make us a far bigger player in terms of global trade, because we can actually have more of a negotiating position in this. And moreover, we are the world's largest supplier of potash. The American agriculture system relies on us. We are the ones that have the power.
Terrific, thank you. And candidates, I'll just tell you that if ever you need me to repeat a question for you, please ask. The question before us right now is, how do we secure Canada's national and economic security? Tracy.
Great, thank you for the question. This is a very important question, in particular considering that we're in this unjustified trade dispute with, coming from the United States, coming from President Trump, which conservatives have pushed back very strong on. Unfortunately, we're going into this situation with this trade dispute and this tariff dispute in a very weakened economic position. Canada has lost $500 billion of investment in the last 10 years of the Liberal government. We have lost hundreds of thousands of good-paying jobs. We have high taxes here, and we've incurred more debt in the last 10 years than all of Canadian history combined. So we're going into this situation in a very weakened economic position. The Liberal government has been anti-resource development, anti-energy, and has had laws like Bill C-69, which has created these problems. And the current Prime Minister, the Liberals, have continued to say that they will not repeal Bill C-69. We need to develop our natural resources, we need to cut taxes, and we need to spur our economy so that we can thrive and push back against these American tariffs.
Terrific, thank you. Stephen, how do we secure Canada's national and economic security?
Let me get to that in a second. There's not much of what I just heard I agree with, and I'll pick one thing. C-69 is not an anti-resource bill. It is basically a roadmap of how to develop resources. If you don't follow the roadmap, you end up in court and nothing gets done. C-69 was put in place to make sure that big national projects can get built and keep companies out of court, because nobody likes to do that. With regard to national economic security, we're going to have to pivot big time and do it quickly. And Europe is probably the place that we're going to go to first, just because they're the ones that probably we share values. We have a long history with Europe. We came to the party as a country big time for them in the last century, and we're going to need to lean on them big time moving forward. And if you would have noticed, that's exactly where Mark Carney went on his first trip as a president, or as a prime minister, I should say. He went to France, met Macron, went over to England, met with Stormer, came back, and that's where we're going to probably end up spending a lot of time.
Terrific, thank you. Our next question starts with you, Tracy. The foreign buyers ban has had a significant effect on resort communities and vacation accommodations across the interior. So if elected, will you commit to exempting resort communities and vacation properties from the ban?
That's a good question. Honestly, that's something that I would need to do some work on. I have heard that from some people in the past, but I think that we need to, that's something that we would really need to look into. I don't believe that specifically is in our platform right now, but my commitment would be to take that back and look to see who that's affecting and how it's affecting different resorts that
Right.
might be in the area. I know I've heard that it's affecting some more than others.
Right.
I know one thing that we heard about from Big White was that they don't have a postal code, and so that's a separate issue. But yeah, that's something that I'd like to take away and look
Right.
into a bit more. Yeah, thank you.
Thank you. And an opportune moment to say to the candidates that when you're given this minute and a half, or if it's a minute, you don't have to fill it. We don't need people talking in circles. If you can make a point succinctly, we can get through more tonight. And that was not commentary on what I just heard, but I'd like it if we could, it would be, if we keep our answers even shorter, we got a lot of questions here.
So how much time do I have left, Kent? Then I think I had.
I think I
You
just
didn't even
took
start the
Tracy's
clock,
time
Ken.
away.
So I can.
Okay, so Stephen, you now have 1 minute to reply to that or give your own view on this this ban.
Yeah, I think broadly speaking, policies that are developed either at the federal government or at the provincial level are very broad brush, and oftentimes, intended consequences in one area where there's a problem cause problems in other areas that didn't have a problem. I agree with Tracy. I would like to look at that and see how that adversely affects different communities in the Okanagan. And obviously, if there's a problem there, obviously run it up the flagpole and see if we can get it turned around. I mean, the MP's job is to make sure that policy doesn't adversely affect the people who live here.
Terrific, thank you. And Trevor.
Well, as far as the spirit of the foreign home buyers ban, anything that is able to transform housing back into something more equivalent to a human right as opposed to an asset to speculate on is hard to disagree with when we have like the housing crisis, the affordability crisis that we're in the process of here. But I do agree with my colleagues that this might be a conversation that we should be having to determine whether or not there are unintended economic consequences specific to resort communities. Because I think of the sweeping changes, the broad brush changes to, say, immigration levels recently as they relate to international students, which have had knock-on effects that have greatly impacted our local universities and colleges, affecting student enrollment, and of course the consequence being a number of instructors are now facing layoffs and the ends of their careers. So I think we should look into this.
Terrific, thank you. And now our next question, Stephen, you'll be starting this one off. When it comes to climate change initiatives, do you support an aggressive approach to regulations?
I support a plan that meets our targets that we committed to. Climate change is a problem. And, you know, broadly, 67% of Canadians want action on climate change. You would consider 66% a clear majority. That's what the definition of a clear majority. So Canadians want action on climate. They know it's important. We see, you know, 100-year events happening in our community and in our country and south of the border happening every other year. It's a problem, and we need to do something about it. You know, how we do that will be important. And again, if you look at a world-renowned economist who has a history of dealing with these types of things, I think the person, you know, best suited to decide how we're going to do it is, at least in this case, Mark Carney, supported by the cabinet and of course the rest of the government. But I don't think this is a function of should we do it. It's a function of how we do it. It's very, very important. And I'll put another point on that. I mentioned earlier we're going to need to go to Europe for all sorts of reasons. They have a big climate program. We're not going to be trading with the Europeans if we abandon climate change. It just doesn't work that way. So on its own merits, we need to deal with climate change. It's a problem. And then given the other things that we're facing right now economically, pivoting to trade more with Europe will require us to have a plan in place. So I support meeting the targets we laid out for ourselves.
Thank you. Tracy.
Thank you, Kent, for this question. One of the best ways that we can help reduce greenhouse gas emissions in the world is to get our LNG to market. We've had numerous countries that have come to Canada, Japan, Germany, Poland, and others, and the Liberal government turned them away. They said there wasn't a business case. Well, about a month ago, Donald Trump signed a deal with Japan. So this is a lost opportunity for Canada. It's lost jobs, and it's lost economic opportunity. So one of the ways that we could help our economy here, but also help other countries, and also to displace commitments that might be to the regime of Russia, is to supply our LNG to the world. We also need to be developing green projects. This Liberal government can't even green-light green projects. They turned down a tidal energy project off of the East Coast. We need to green-light green projects. We need to build nuclear, and we need to get our very clean and ethically produced LNG to the world. Thank you.
Thank you. Trevor.
Well, I think without question, we need to take aggressive action as far as clamping down on the big polluters and the big emitters. I mean, we are well past the point of being able to just set, you know, middling targets that can then just be perpetually procrastinated on. And it doesn't matter what kind of bold agreement is made internationally. I mean, there are always ways for our big polluters in this country to weasel out of it, to squirm out of it. I mean, even with the carbon tax, the industrial carbon tax, there were exemptions being granted to the biggest emitters. Now, there is an enormous economic opportunity ahead of us here. A just transition away from our overdependence on fossil fuels. We are talking about durable, lasting jobs that are not connected to the volatile price of oil. I mean, how many times are there sweeping layoffs in the oil patch because of a downturn in the price of oil? We want to be able to have electricity and power and fuel that is produced that is not so capricious.
Thank you. So Tracy, you'll kick this one off now. With regard to immigration issues, do you support increasing immigration to a level that creates a larger workforce and a feeder stream for major educational institutions?
Thank you for this question, Kent. This is a very important question to our community. under the last 10 years of the Liberal government, they have really broken our immigration system. We see it all the time at our community office, where we're working so hard to try and process and help a lot of our local community members. There is such delays in processing right now with immigration that our farmers here locally aren't even able to get in their temporary workers. Well, you know, pruning can't wait. They need their workers now. And so what's happened is the Liberals have made these real knee-jerk reactions over the last couple of years. I've actually been quite involved in this with my current shadow ministry role that includes employment and workforce development. It also includes LMIAs. So I've met with local businesses here, as well as different businesses, industry groups, and post-secondary from across the country on this, who have come to me saying there was no consultation and all of these knee-jerk reactions that have happened over the last few years. We know that there's been a fair amount of fraud that's happened, and we know that we want to bring in workers to meet the skill sets that we need here in Canada and to fill those workforce needs. And so that's where our focus needs to be, is on economic immigration. And at the same time, we need to make sure that the immigration levels, that we have the jobs, we have the health care, and we have the housing in order to supply them.
Terrific. Trevor?
Could you repeat the full question for me?
Yes. With regard to immigration issues, do you support increasing immigration to a level that creates a larger workforce and a feeder stream for major educational institutions?
Well, I think the reality of the situation is that we have many jobs and many industries in this country that do depend on foreign labor. Now, the main issue, as I see it, is that our temporary foreign worker program, it creates conditions for horrible abuse of workers. I mean, especially when you have these closed work permits that lock a person in under the thumb of one employer and allow them to be taken advantage of. Now, I think that we as a country benefit so much from having skilled people coming in from all different cultures and parts of the world, and we are better for it because people want to settle here. They have dreams. They want to dig their roots in. They want to contribute. I think that prioritizing people that are wanting to train up, especially in industries that are desperately in need of people, I do absolutely agree with prioritizing their studies.
Terrific, thank you. Steve?
Thank you. It is difficult to balance all the things that need to be balanced on immigration. I think when I was in Parliament, the numbers were around 350,000 people, and it did balloon out to about 500,000 people, and I think there's a recognition that that balance was didn't strike the right balance given all the variables, housing, employment, all the things you have to think about, and they're reprioritizing that, and I think they're going back down towards 350,000 people. I think what's important to note is that when you talk about the people that come here, I mean, we're a country of immigrants, we all are, and when you bring people in, you have to make sure you have all types of streams. I know in the past, the Conservatives really focused on economics, and that's important, don't get me wrong, but family reunification, caregivers, those are all really important streams that the Blue Party didn't cater to at all, and really focused on the economic piece. I'm not saying the economic piece isn't important, it is, but you really, once you get the number right, you have to make sure you have all the streams that benefit all Canadians.
Perfect, thank you. Trevor, your turn to get the ball rolling on this question. How would you address crime and improve public safety in Kelowna?
Well, that's a great question. Now, in Kelowna, we have the visible symptoms of poverty. There are people experiencing homelessness that are very much a part of our downtown core, and all throughout the city. Now, so much crime is the result of people living in desperate circumstances who are experiencing terrible poverty, who may have substance abuse issues, who are simultaneously dealing with any number of mental health crises. Now, the way that we meaningfully address crime is by going after the root, not simply penalizing the symptoms. The tough-on-crime approach that fails to distinguish the genuinely dangerous criminals from people who are themselves victims of a system does not lead to people being rehabilitated in any meaningful way. And if we are able to genuinely address poverty, either through some sort of a universal basic income or just properly funding the sorts of support systems that can seriously restore dignity and security and stability in people's lives, the need to offend, the need to commit crime goes away. We have to focus on pulling people out of poverty, addressing their substance abuse issues by housing them.
Thank you. And to you, Tracy, how would you address crime and improve public safety in Kelowna?
Thank you very much. This is one of the things that I hear about the most, and it doesn't matter whether it's in a residential neighborhood or with small businesses. I just door-knocked a lady the other day that said someone tried to light her fence on fire. A small business owner told me the other day he just had to invest $30,000 in more equipment because of all the break-ins that he's had. This is a direct result of Liberal soft-on crime laws, Bill C-5 and Bill C-75. One of them removed minimum sentences from really serious crimes like drug trafficking and gun smuggling. The other one changed the bail system. You see this in the news all the time, the revolving door of the bail system. There's very little ramifications for serial criminals. We know that there's so many crimes that have doubled and increased. Violent crimes are up in our community and across the country. And so our approach is we need to remove those laws that were changed because this is causing the big problems. Law enforcement are even talking about this. We need to strengthen our laws, and we need to focus on victims and not give repeat offenders a pass in our community. Thank you.
Thank you. Stephen, how are we going to address crime and public safety in Kelowna?
Well, I think there's a bit of a blended answer between the two answers I just heard. I think it's important to address the root causes of crime with compassion and harm reduction. But I also agree with Tracy that when I had a meeting with the mayor a week and a half ago, he wanted to talk about habitual property crime because it's a problem, and we have to deal with it. I heard it on the door a ton too. It's a problem. It's particularly bad in Kelowna, and it does need to be dealt with. Mark Carney came out with a plan. I'll just share some of the things. More RCMP, more CBSA officers. The piece that's going to be critically important, other than having more people on the streets, is tying the loose ends on letting people kind of go through the revolving door of the court system. So, and there's a commitment to do that, which will be probably a statute change and a law change, and we're all going to have to get in the room and figure out what that looks like. Compassion is important, but several dozen people are responsible for most of the problem, and it has to be dealt with.
Thank you. Trace, you can take this one first off. How would you work towards meaningful economic reconciliation with Indigenous communities in the Okanagan?
I appreciate that question, and this is something that I've actually been doing some work on, again, because of my role with employment and workforce development. We know that there are many First Nations that want to develop resources. They do want to thrive economically, and so we have said that we want to give them the opportunity to do that. For those that do want to develop their resources and do want to be more self-sustaining and have different revenue streams, we should be able to give them the opportunity to do that for those that want to do that. And so we want to open things up so that there would be some changes in the tax system. There would be changes in order for them to be able to thrive economically from the resource development on their properties. For someone that wants to be more in the weeds on this, you can see a address that the Conservative leader gave to the Assembly of First Nations that really lays this out in detail. And so for those that want to, we should give them the opportunity to do this. There are a lot of barriers to that right now, and there are many of them, and I've met with many of them that really do want to go down this path, and we should give them the opportunity to do that. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. Stephen, the question to you, how will you work towards meaningful economic reconciliation with our Indigenous communities here?
Well, we were talking about LNG project, and just recently, this isn't locally to Kelowna, but it's certainly in our province, the federal government announced an investment in a project called Cedar LNG, and it's a 50-50 First Nations commercial operation, and it's a $200 million investment, and I think it's up in the North Coast. So that's a really tangible thing that we can point our finger to say that's going to help. Some policy things that came out, they want to double the fund from $5 billion to $10 billion on Indigenous loan guarantee program to help Indigenous people get involved in companies and in our economic development of the country. But I also, when I was looking at this, there was a number of commitments made back when I was in that still haven't been fully realized. There's big investments for housing and education. And it's not because people weren't trying, but a lot of the housing stuff is in remote communities. So there's still a willingness to do these things. It's just going to take more time, and I'd like to see those programs built out.
Terrific, thank you. Trevor.
Well, I think that the most important part of this is to ensure that Indigenous voices are included in all decision-making to do with Indigenous land. Now, moreover, in remote communities that simply don't have the equivalent infrastructure to more modernized urban centers, it is difficult to imagine how people in these communities can participate fully in our economy. Now, ensuring, for instance, that things like fiber internet are being run out to remote communities, that there is reliable, clean drinking water. These are things that are going to allow all of us, Indigenous, settler colonial types like myself, to all be able to have the same opportunities, because there is an amazing opportunity for people to be able to participate in our economy through the internet. This is as vital a utility in the modern era as any.
Thank you. Stephen, you'll be taking this question first off. How would you ensure better access to healthcare services, including mental health support for residents here in Kelowna?
Well, first we need to elect a government that wholeheartedly believes in a publicly funded universal health care system. So that would be number one. Did you pause the clock there for a second when they? No, I'm serious when I say that. That's absolutely true. And we need to continue to build the programs that were put in place in the last several years. We talked about this earlier, dental care. I want to use that as an example. The program's not fully built out yet, and it's really, really important for Canadians. Right now, everyone below, under 18 and over 64, under certain circumstances, I think if you make less than $90,000 a year, you can have, public or company dental care, and you have to file the tax return, you get dental care. But that program's not built out until May. The election's on April 28th. Now, the opposition says they're going to keep it after they pretended it didn't exist for 2 years, which was unbelievable, but now they're keeping it. But here's the rub, they're not going to build it out. And May 1st, May 15th, and May 30th, all the ages get built out. So at the end of the month, the entire program, as it was envisioned, will be available to Canadians. That's what they want. Canadians want universal public health care. They want the social safety net. And you know what? If at the end of May, dental care will be a big part of that. There's pharma care, there's child care, all the things that go along with that. That's what Canadians want. That's what I'm hearing.
True. Thank you. Tracy, how would you ensure better access to health care, including mental health support for residents of Kelowna?
Great, thank you very much. Conservatives do believe in public health care and would continue to fulfill the promises to go to the health care transfers to the provinces and any increases that are committed, just to get that out there. One of the things that we can do is, right now in Canada, there are 50,000 nurses and doctors that have immigrated to Canada and they're not able to work. Sometimes it takes up to 3 years before they're able to be tested to see their qualifications, whether they can start working or whether they need to do upgrading. And so Conservatives have committed to what we're calling a Blue Seal program, which is very similar to Red Seal for the skilled trades for healthcare, and that we would commit to someone being tested within 60 days. as opposed to years. There are international standards, and they do this in other countries, and we need to do this in Canada. On the mental health side, I had a private member's bill called End the Revolving Door Act to get mental health assessment and addiction treatment and recovery in federal penitentiaries, and unfortunately, the Liberals voted against it. Thank you.
Thank you. Trevor.
Well, the NDP is staunchly opposed to the privatization and Americanization of our healthcare system. And this is something that we are seeing happen in provinces with conservative premiers. They are ignoring the Canada Health Act, and they are plowing ahead with privatizing our system anyhow. And the consequence of this is that we are pulling resources away from our public system. Specifically, I'm talking about the people. They are being poached. We are having nurses, we are having healthcare professionals being poached from the public system and added into the for-profit healthcare system. Now, you add a profit layer to healthcare, you are taking money and resources that should be put into people's well-being. Now, to build off of Stephen's point, yes, we have the start of universal dental care and pharmacare as a result of the confidence and supply agreement, where the NDP held the balance of power and forced these concessions out of the Liberal government. That wouldn't have happened without us. But Mark Carney has not committed to expanding pharmacare. We need this to include prescription drugs beyond just diabetes medication and birth control. We need more.
Okay, Trevor, I'm going to get you to kick off the next one. You can be the first one to answer this question for us. What investments would you pursue to improve public transportation and reduce traffic congestion here in Kelowna?
Well, I love this topic because I am a regular transit user. I mean, I drive, but I prefer to get by on foot or by transit whenever possible. Now, I think that what we can do in the short term is we can offer more rapid bus line options like the 97 Express, which really has made life so much easier for those of us that travel to and from the bridge. But of course, the problem with existing public transit options in Kelowna is that we are still using infrastructure that is designed for individual vehicles. You know, it suffers from the same bottlenecks. The bridge is still a bottleneck. Traffic is still something that has to be dealt with. Now, really, the future of public transit in this community, these are ideas that have been proposed by one of our city councillors, Gord Lovegrove. There's been work on this at UBC Okanagan. We could have something in the way of a light rail system that is at least able to connect parts of the city with other parts of the city, that bypasses the traffic congestion, that is able to move people rapidly, that is able to move people without burning the same amount of fuel. This is a more efficient means of getting people around, and this will take the load off of our roads, and it will be a better experience for all of us, because you know, an under sort of respected part of driving is the need to park your cars. Who likes to pay for parking? I sure don't.
Thank you. Traffic's bad. Tracy, what do you have to say about it?
Great, thank you very much. Well, as a former municipal councillor and also sitting on the regional district, a lot of this is the decisions are really, and the research is really done at the municipal level, and then quite often they'll go to higher levels of government and say, look, here's what the needs are, we've done all the research, and then there's potential funding options that are looked at. So, you know, I know that there's transportation plans that are done here locally and regionally, and there has been in the past some federal funding, so it just depends on what is brought forth. I think the other thing that I wanted to mention is that the Conservatives have said that if we're going to fund transit specifically, that we need to make sure that, especially for those major systems, that there is a densification, that there has to be a commitment from the municipalities to have densification in housing around where those hubs are, so that if the federal government is involved, if we're going to fund something, you actually need to have the densification there so that you have transit that actually works within a community and is going to where most of the people are. Thank you.
Thank you. Stephen.
Thank you. I had a meeting with the mayor probably 3 days after the election kicked off, and we went through some of the infrastructure projects that the city was was either in the process of trying to deliver or was on their wish list to deliver. One of those was extending Claremont out to UBCO to have like 3 streams of traffic, Springfield 97 and Clermont, just to take some of the pressure off 97. If you ever tried to drive on that on late afternoon, it's a bit of a nightmare. We desperately need a new transit exchange for the buses. That's a $350 million project. It's big. There is funding available. I don't think it'll cover that whole thing. Let's say the funding model was 30, 30, 30, so the federal piece would be 100 million-ish. There's funding available. I don't know if that funding will be available at the end of this month if we put the wrong person in the Prime Minister's chair.
That concludes our first round of questions. We were planning on beginning our next round, keeping the first question to 1 minute, but I see you're thinking ahead, Fraser. I think we'll keep going with 1 minute and 30. We have time for that. Let's use it. So the first question in this bunch, I'll start with you since you're all warmed up, Stephen. How do we foster good government and earn the trust of Canadians?
I think it really starts with communication, and it's very difficult to do that with the way, disinformation, misinformation. Everyone's getting their information from a different source, and oftentimes I talk to a lot of people, like everybody on the stage does, and I'm sure everyone in this building does, and oftentimes people are upset or mad about something that's actually not even a thing. And that's a problem. So we're going to have to figure out how to. I mean, there are legitimate things to be upset about. There's no question about it. But it's unfortunate that people are oftentimes worked up over things that aren't even true or aren't even real. So I think, how do we foster good governance? Obviously, we need quality people to make smart decisions, taking into consideration the place we find ourselves in, which is pretty critical right now. And the communication piece with the people is super important. How we do it, when we do it, being available to them. All those things are part of how we foster, I think, good governance and communication with people that elect people to go to be in the government.
Terrific. Thank you. So, Tracy, the question to you then, how do we foster good government and earn the trust of Canadians?
Thank you for that question. We need to have a government that is accountable and is transparent. What has happened over the 10 years of this Liberal government has been one scandal, one corruption after another. One of the most recent ones was SDTC, which some people call the Green Slush Fund. But what that one was there was funding that was given out, and the appointed board members that were appointed by the Liberal minister were giving money to themselves in organizations that they either owned or ran. The Auditor General actually did a report on this, did a full analysis, and found that $400 million was filtered through to these individuals, and the Auditor General only audited half of the contracts. So this is just one good example. Of course, we've got ArriveCam. We've got many other ones that we can, that we're probably all aware of. And so we need to get control of this. We need to have accountability, and we need to have transparency. Thank you.
Thank you. Trevor, how are we going to foster good government and earn the trust of Canadians?
I mean, I think it's simple. I think you deliver for Canadians. You deliver on your promises. You introduce programs that offer a material benefit, a noticeable improvement in people's lives. I mean, the clearest example here being expanding on our universal health care. These are things that people feel. They notice when all of a sudden they aren't having to pay out of pocket for dental care, for their prescription medication. It is so simple when you think about it, that if you have a government that is genuinely aligned with the interests of hardworking people and marginalized people, we are looking at introducing things that can help all of us. I mean, imagine a government that really centers your needs and is not so concerned about catering to extremely profitable corporations. I mean, corporate greed is not what deserves the attention of the government. It is everyday people like you and I.
Terrific. Thank you. This question to you, Tracy. Housing continues to be top of mind for all Canadians. Amid this housing crisis, what can the federal government do to help increase supply across the housing continuum in Canada?
Thank you very much, Kent. You know, under the current government, over the last 10 years with their housing plan, they have spent billions of dollars, and in fact, housing starts are down. We're now building houses per year about what houses were built in the 1970s. And of course, we've seen population increases and need increases. So the results are actually going down. The current government has a philosophy of building bureaucracy instead of building homes. And again, being on the housing committee, I've heard testimony over and over and over again of how red tape and bureaucracy and high taxes is actually holding back the building of houses. One of this was actually the capital gains tax that we heard about over and over again, of how the Liberals implementing that last year was going to harm home building in Canada. And we've lost a lot of investment to the United States. So we need to remove the red tape, we need to remove the bureaucracy. One of the recent announcements from the Liberals is actually to build another bureaucracy. Like, there's so much bureaucracy, they actually want to build another office and another bureaucracy. So we want instead to reduce taxes. We want money to go right into the pockets of people. So as part of this is to remove GST on new homes, and also to incentivize municipalities to bring down their own taxes, their own charges, to match that, which can, for a new homeowner, relate to $100,000 in savings for a first-time home buyer. Thank you.
Thank you. So Trevor, to you, how do we increase the housing supply?
Well, Kelowna, like many communities across this country, we desperately need affordable housing. I mean, if left to its own devices, the free market, real estate developers, they know that the money is in building luxury apartments, luxury condominiums. If without some sort of intervention here, this housing market will not just somehow right itself. It will continue down this path because that's where the money is. Now, the NDP's plan, part of their plan, is to look at viable land, public land, consult with all relevant stakeholders, municipalities, First Nations bands. We will identify land that can be a good site for affordable housing units. Homes that people can not only purchase, that they can rent, things that are within the budgets that are attainable for ordinary people. Now, also, we think that to make homeownership more attainable, all things considered, we also need to be able to offer low-interest mortgages for first-time home buyers.
Terrific, thank you. Okay, Stephen, solve the supply of housing in 1 minute.
Okay, I'm on it. Well, first of all, we have to maximize all the things we have in front of us. I talked about what the Liberals plan to do, and I can build that out in a second, but I want to talk about the Housing Accelerator Fund. Kelowna got $32 million for this fund. They've spent 17. According to Kelowna, it has been very helpful in them, and if it's built out in its entirety, it will deliver 950 homes faster than they would have otherwise been built if they didn't get the funding. So if if Pierre Poilievre gets a government at the end of the month, the $15 million goes into the waste bin. The other thing I want to point out about that, because I think it's important, is the Conservatives leaked or released a list of people that supported that. Dan Elbis's name was on there. There's 17 MPs. The one sitting next to me didn't support that money for this community, which I find not awesome.
Okay. Our next question will go to Trevor. The Online News Act, Bill C-18, was brought in 2 years ago to force online platforms to pay for Canadian news content that they share. But instead of paying, Facebook and Instagram simply blocked all Canadian news content. So now news outlets are going out of business by the dozen, nearly 100 of them, and Canadians are missing out on news coverage that they had come to depend on. You won't see anything from this on any major news sites tonight when you go home. So what would you do, Trevor, about Bill C-18?
The use of social media as people's primary source for news, we are in something of a crisis of the propagation of disinformation and misinformation courtesy of these platforms, and the removal of authoritative sources through the inability to share news articles. This is only fueling the sorts of conspiracies that run rampant on social media. It is making it so that the more untrustworthy the source, really the louder their voice becomes, because there isn't a counter narrative that's really being able to be provided on these platforms. Now, I understand that the spirit of the bill is good. I mean, we're trying to find a way for Canadian news sites, for broadcasters to be compensated for the sharing for the reposting of their content on these platforms. But I think that in many ways it misses the realities of how social media works. This isn't like old school broadcasting. Now, as far as how the bill works in practice, look, I mean, we are getting bullied by these big social media companies, Meta, et cetera, just outright banning, rather than trying to work with the government to find ways to comply. And also, this, in many respects, means that we have to find ways to actually enforce these regulations so that our broadcasters are not going to get left out of it.
Thank you. Stephen, C18, what do we do about it?
Yeah, it's a problem. I think there was unintended consequences to what they were trying to achieve, and I think they probably need to scrap it and come up with something different. That's about as clear as I can be.
Okay. Thank you. Tracy.
Thank you. First of all, I'll just say in the onset that I would support any day money going in the pockets of Canadians and families rather than going into bureaucracies. Second, on Bill C-18, this was a Liberal bill that we have seen the results of it. I debated this legislation, I opposed the legislation, and what we have seen is a censorship online through online platforms where Canadians are not able to see online news and to share online news. We've heard that this has been a concern during when there's disasters and when there's situations happening, and it really minimizes Canadians' ability in order to view really important online news. We knew at the time that the losers were going to be small independent media. There was an analysis that was done where the biggest winners were going to be the likes of CBC and the other two largest organizations like Bell and Rogers, and it was the small independent media that were going to be the biggest losers, and that's exactly what has happened in this legislation being implemented.
Thank you. Stephen, you can start this one off for us. What steps will you take to restore federal funding to help combat the threat of invasive mussels in the Okanagan and better support the provincial efforts in this regard?
I'm glad you asked me that question, because I think I've been the only MP in a couple of MPs that actually got federal support for this very issue. You have to get with the folks from fisheries in Ottawa, and you have to bend their arm and remind them how much of a problem this is for us. And it has a potential to be a massive problem. It is a problem, but again, between that and some of the other things we face with our lakes, everyone wants to come here in the summer, and we all know why. And if nobody wants to do what they need to do, like drive through, clean their boats, go in, do their thing, leave, clean their boat, and go, because it's painful. But there's ways to deal with it. There's technology to deal with it, and it just requires funding. So I would absolutely commit to doing what I did before, which is raise the issue again and get whatever funding I could get to help solve the problem.
Thank you. Tracy.
Great, thank you very much. This is a very important issue to our region. It's very important to tourism, and it's important to every resident here. One of the things that we had found out through it's like an access to information, basically, and what we were able to find out was the breakdown across the country on the money that was spent by the federal government on invasive species. And what we found was that British Columbia was very, very underrepresented when you look at all of the national funding, to the point that we received less than 2% of the national funding. And I would argue that British Columbia is very important. And so what we have been asking for is for a reallocation of that national funding, so that British Columbia gets our fair share. And that's something that I've been asking for, and I'll continue to. Thank you.
Thank you. Trevor.
Well, the threat of invasive species affecting the survival of our ecosystem is very real, and this is a threat that we are going to see increasingly as our climate continues to destabilize, because migratory patterns of animals are changing. We are seeing all kinds of insects that are moving all over the world that weren't doing these things before. Now, as far as specifically the mussels, this is really maybe a regulatory failure. We have people that own boats that aren't doing what needs to be done as far as making sure that they are not transporting these invasive mussels into waters where they don't belong. And if it is a question of funding, and it is, we need to make sure that our regulators that are on the scene are able to identify offender boats and deal with them accordingly.
Thank you. New question now goes to you, Tracy. What initiatives would you propose to tackle homelessness and support vulnerable populations in our community?
Thank you very much. With some of the studies that I've been involved in at the committee level on the Housing Committee, we've seen the largest amount of homeless now are the working poor. And so, we've seen the cost of living increases over the last 10 years, especially over about the last 5 years. I was just at a fundraiser for the Central Okanagan Food Bank a couple of weeks ago, and they were showing that food bank usage here is up 340% in the last 5 years. I hear continually from families and from seniors that are having a really tough time just paying for basic necessities. So we need to focus on bringing taxes down. We need to focus on making sure that inflation is brought down because this is affecting families. One of the things that we've said is that we would reduce the taxes by 15% for working families in the lower tax bracket. This would mean $1,800 for the average family. We also, there is sometimes it's related, homelessness is related to income, but sometimes it's related to other things like mental health and addiction. And so, we've seen here in British Columbia where drug decriminalization has been supported, where government supplied illicit drugs have been supported, and we know that this has made it worse. There's reports that this is actually making it worse, and so this is something that we oppose, and that we would instead focus on addiction treatment and recovery.
I lost my place. Who wants to go? I think it's your turn. Sorry.
Oh, sure. Can you please?
You had one job.
I know.
Could you repeat the full question, please?
I was just thinking ahead. Trevor.
Oh, sure. If you'd be so kind as to repeat the full question.
Homelessness.
Right. What initiatives would you propose to tackle homelessness and support vulnerable people? Right.
Now, a housing first approach really is the way for us to get people who are experiencing homelessness back on their feet. It's not reasonable to expect people to be coming to you as the perfect candidates for being rehoused. These are people that are in desperate conditions. They're living in destitute conditions. They may be self-medicating. They are in a position where they are unable to help themselves. And if we are able to offer, at the very least, a roof over their head and a place for them to be able to regain some basic dignities, this is how we begin to meaningfully rehabilitate people. Now, there are all sorts of options available to us, and there are models that are working very well on, for instance, Vancouver Island. I've seen them myself. We are able to build communes, community-type living arrangements of tiny homes, of modular homes. These are relatively affordable ways that we can get people into homes and rebuild a sense of community and trust in each other.
Terrific. Thank you. Stephen, homelessness and vulnerable populations.
Thank you. I agree with Trevor. I think you got to start with trying to address the root cause of the problem. So mental health and addiction are oftentimes that, and the government has put a lot of resources into trying to help solve those issues. But the other problem is we just don't have enough housing. We just don't have the volume that we need. I would argue that the Conservatives' approach is just going to, tax cuts and incentives is going to build a certain type of home, maybe, but it's certainly not going to build out the types of homes that we need. We need a broad range of housing, from low-income housing all the way up to, the people that have $1 million, sure, they'll love a GST rebate on their $1 million house. I'm not saying that's not important, but the Conservative plan just doesn't address the bottom end of the low income housing, seniors, students, people that just don't have the fiscal capacity to get a house or get into housing. So the Build Canada Homes is a comprehensive plan, and I think if there's something that can solve the problem, I think that's the right direction we should head in.
Okay, now, Trevor, you can start this one off for us. How will you address the burden of tariffs and duties on local lumber production?
Well, this is showing us the danger that we ultimately have put ourselves in by having a free trade agreement with an untrustworthy trading partner. The need for us to be shipping raw logs across the border, for them to be processed, have the value added, and then shipped back into this country for use in construction and every other application for it. We have the weakness of that exposed to us. It's laid bare, right? We need to be doing our value-added processing on this side of the border, and that largely eliminates the threat of these duties and these tariffs. At the very least, then, we only have to sell them once. We don't have to buy them back for our own use. Now, with that in mind, this is also presenting us an opportunity to really reevaluate our forestry sector as a whole. We are locked in to unsustainable levels of timber exports. It's like this is a suicide course that we're on. We can't just recklessly keep logging at the rate that we're doing it, especially if we're replacing these trees with monoculture lodgepole pines. These things are fire magnets, especially now in a world where we are looking at, the threat of severe wildfires on a year-to-year basis. We cannot afford to be doing it business as usual with regard to forestry.
Thank you. So, Tracy, how will you address the burden of tariffs and duties on local lumber production?
Well, thank you for that question. We're in a situation right now where we don't have a softwood lumber agreement with the United States. The agreement expired back in 2015, and there was an agreement under the former Conservative government that was also renegotiated, but it extended in 2015. And that was also not included in our agreement with CUSMA. And so here we are in this situation where we've lost a lot of jobs in British Columbia, and we don't have an agreement. And so, what we need to do is we need to start looking at what other markets we can be working with, with the instability happening in the United States. But part of the problem is because we haven't had an agreement, a softwood lumber agreement, since 2015. Thank you.
Thank you. Stephen, how will you address the burden of tariffs and duties on local lumber production?
Well, we could probably start by helping ourselves. Build Canada Homes is going to try and ramp up home building from about 250,000 starts to 500,000 starts. That is using mass timber, so I'm sure we have way more supply than just that, but that's certainly a start. Maybe use our own materials to build out homes in our own country. And then again, I think Tracy mentioned it, we need to find new destinations for our products. That's across the board. Pick anything that we export. We're an export nation primarily. We're going to need to have new customers out there, and that's why it's really important we have a prime minister that has relationships outside our own borders. I learned when I was in politics that it's very, very much relationship based. How effective you are as a parliamentarian or as a politician has a lot to do with relationships, and Mark Carney has relationships.
Thank you. So, Fraser, I want to add one more question to this phase before we get to the lightning round, so starting at 1.5 minutes again. And I'll let you kick this one off, if you will. Stephen, how would you ensure Canada's infrastructure can handle the region's rapid growth?
Well, there's projects in the Government of Canada, when I was in Parliament was started to form infrastructure relationships with municipalities directly for a couple of reasons. One, it made things faster. Two, provinces didn't always have matching dollars. And three, some provinces with conservative premiers wouldn't let the money flow down, literally wouldn't let it flow down in the municipality. So the federal government went around them and went straight to the municipality. This particular government recognizes that you have to invest in community. Kelowna doesn't have the money it needs to build out its infrastructure, and especially if you consider its growth. Again, we're one of the fastest growing municipalities in the country. We will need federal and provincial support of varying degrees. The funding model traditionally is 30, 30, 30. I think when I got water for our community, the federal government picked up 50% of that money, and the province was 33, and the municipality got the savings, and they only had to put up 17%. So electing a government that believes in investing in community is probably a good start.
Thank you. Tracy, what can the feds do for us to help us keep up with the infrastructure?
Thank you very much. We know that this is very important to the community here. Part of that is to make some of the processing easier. Again, we have a lot of red tape and bureaucracy, and we also have money that we put into other areas. So as an example, the Liberals had invested in an infrastructure bank in China. Well, you know, we say that we should not be investing in an infrastructure bank in China in order to build infrastructure in China. We should be building infrastructure in Canada. They also started an infrastructure bank that has built hardly any infrastructure, if anything. So it's another level of bureaucracy in order to put infrastructure into Canadian communities. And so we need to streamline some of these processes, and you know, that's part of working with the different levels of government and seeing what their priorities are. But the way that it is right now, the bottlenecks are a lot of red tape and a lot of bureaucracy, and we need to streamline that. Thank you.
Thank you. Trevor, infrastructure.
Well, I want to, for this question, focus on our power grid. Now, right now, prices for electricity compared to other parts of the country, relatively cheap, but we are predicting massive increases in household electricity bills. Now, for the longest time, this is technology that's well established. You know, rooftop solar is a thing that exists. There's been funding for it. Less of an interest in it these days. But if we are able to decentralize energy production, we're able to take the load off of our power grid, because we are anticipating not just increasing cost of delivering electricity, but increasing demand for electricity. We have the possibility here of having our city, residential parts of our city, be powering themselves, feeding power back into the grid. This is something far more future-minded and far more sustainable. If we are able to have our energy production not just be relying on hydro, and certainly not having to have power imported back from the United States.
All right, thank you. Okay, so that things are about to change now. We're moving on to what we call the lightning round. Does that sound exciting? All right. How this works, though, we'll just be giving one question to each candidate down the row. We're going to cover a lot. They won't all be talking about the same thing. So, but it's all kind of random as to who would be answering the questions. I'm going to start immediately to my right with Trevor. Do you support reciprocal tariffs? We're all tariff experts now. Do you support tariffs to be reciprocal right now?
Is this like a yes or no? Is that more or less?
Well, if you can keep it to yes or no, I might run out of questions, but
I think it's 30
maybe a yes or
seconds
no
is what they
followed
said.
by a sentence to back up why you would say such a thing.
Yes.
Do you support Canada employing reciprocal tariffs?
I do support Canada employing reciprocal tariffs, because we are dealing with a bully, an irrational government that is just trying to crush us and absorb us. I mean, we have to fight back. There's no way around it. And we're tough. We're tough in this country. You know, we can persevere. You know, we are going to form new allegiances amongst ourselves to look out for one another. We can weather this. We've got it.
Sure. Thank you. So yeah, for this round, I don't know if we have a minute is the max, but as short as you like to be on this one, and this sort of dovetails into the last one. Tracy, to you, what's the best way to negotiate with Donald Trump?
I wanted that one.
Well, look, you know, we see every day there's different announcements coming from the United States, and so conservatives, like we push back very strongly against comments made by Donald Trump, push back very strongly against comments made about the 51st state. We have also said to put on reciprocal tariffs. At the same time, we've said that we need to be building here in Canada and changing policies so that we're more self-sustaining and that we can bring investment back to Canada. So the way for us to move forward is for us to be strong. We need a strong economy in order for us to do the things that we want to do, and in order to bring good jobs here to the country. So
Thank you.
thank you.
To you, Stephen, if your national party's position conflicts with the wishes of your local community, who do you support?
Well, politics is a team sport. I'll put that out there as a starter. But it really depends. I've voted against my own government. I don't know if anyone else at this table has done that, but I have done it. I won't get into the reason why, but you got to be careful when you do that because it depends on a lot of things. If the outcome isn't going to change, you might want to not do that because it does ruffle a lot of people's feathers. And if you can't change the outcome anyways, do you want to burn that kind of political capital? So do you go against your own government? I would say yes, under certain circumstances. I would say think about it carefully. If you're going against your own government, it's not going to change the outcome of what you're trying to achieve. But it's something certainly that is, every MP may or may not have to face. And to make it easy, yes, under the right circumstances, I would vote against my own government.
Thank you. Trevor, do you support a second crossing between the West Side and Kelowna?
I mean, if this were like a magic genie and if I'm, rubbing the magic lamp and it could just happen with, a snap of a finger, I mean, in theory it sounds good, but I mean, this has all the makings of an infrastructure boondoggle that will be mired in red tape, that will just take years and years and endless amounts of funding to probably get nowhere. I think that this plan, unless we have something thoroughly hashed out on paper and we have buy-in from both municipalities, all groups, First Nations groups, we have like a costed plan for this, let's talk about it then. But it's simply too lofty of a thing for us to be able to just commit to. And there are better ways for us to address traffic issues across the lake than simply attempting to build another bridge.
All right, thank you. Tracy, to you, do you support the expansion of affordable housing initiatives?
Well, I mean, affordable housing is definitely one of the most important factors. I mean, one of the things at the federal level is the federal government hasn't been able to really even come up with a definition as to what affordable housing is for a family. And so, when we look at that, we have to look at all of the needs of a community. And when we factor in tent encampments, homelessness, housing that is affordable for young families, housing needs that are for seniors. I mean, the concept in general, but everyone's needs are different. There's also supportive housing as well that you can tie into that as well, where people need supports. So of course, in general, it's something that we need to support, and every community and every situation is different.
Terrific, thank you. Stephen, do you support the legalization of all illicit drugs as a public health measure?
I don't know. I don't. I think we've dabbled in that. Some countries say that they've had some success with it. I think in BC we've tried little pilot projects that probably haven't worked out the way. It's a controversial thing. I'm certainly for harm reduction. There's no question. I think that would be a bridge too far for me personally.
Thank you. Trevor, would an NDP government develop a housing skills agenda for Canada that equips our workforce and empowers them to recruit skilled trade workers? Recruit them.
Recruit them, like domestically recruit them?
I think the intent of the question is that you would be able to recruit them like from another country.
Oh yeah, well, I mean, we are a party that believes in opportunity. And if skilled people are courageous enough to want to start a new life in our country, where we definitely have a need for hardworking, motivated people, especially in trades. I mean, absolutely. Because, really what we believe, and this is really sort of an expansion on in my earlier comments about the temporary foreign worker program, is that if you are good enough to work in this country, you're good enough to live here, right? You are investing yourself in this country, and this country wants to invest in you. So, absolutely.
As it turns out, the next question I have here is pretty similar, but to you, Tracy, do you support transferring credentials from other provinces or even outside Canada to improve local workforce?
Yes, I think that this is something that we absolutely need to streamline, and I talked about it a little bit earlier. So, as an example, with the Blue Seal program that I was mentioning briefly on healthcare, I was talking to. I door-knocked someone just recently that her and her husband had moved here, and he was a pharmacist from another province that was a pharmacist for over 20 years. And it took him a year before he was able to work here as a pharmacist. We hear quite often with different healthcare professionals that go across the country that aren't able to work in their professions very easily. So this would include with the Blue Seal program for immigrants that are coming to the country so that they can quickly, as I was mentioning earlier, be tested and know whether or not they can start working or need upgrading. But in addition to that, the Blue Seal would be labor mobility across the country for healthcare workers, so that just like with the Red Seal, that you could move across the country and work within your profession very easily. Thank you.
Thank you. Stephen, is your party committed to a climate target that is consistent with a climate-safe world?
I believe it's net zero by 2050. There's some mid-milestones that we have to meet, but I believe they are on track. That's the plan, is they want to get to net zero by 2050.
All right, terrific. Trevor, would your party take steps to reverse the backwards trend in measles vaccination programs?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, it's beyond understanding this. The fact that measles is once again a disease that is, running rampant amongst our children. I mean, we are seeing declining vaccination rates resulting in the reemergence of diseases that we long thought eradicated. I mean, polio, one example. It's like, as a society, I think collectively we have a very short memory. The idea of there still being people alive today that spent time in an iron lung during their childhood years, who are dealing with the lifelong ramifications of preventable illnesses. These vaccines to prevent measles are things that have long been accepted as a completely ordinary, normal thing. And this is an example of the kind of conspiratorial thinking that has been able to spread because of social media.
Thank you. To you, Tracy, as Canada tries to establish new international trading partners, would you push for stronger action on climate change to meet international emissions targets?
Yeah, thank you. Well, the way that Canada can support that, as I was mentioning earlier, is to get some of our clean energy around the world, like LNG, for example. Right now, there are coal-fired plants that are being built around the world, and Canada can supply our clean energy in order to mitigate that. It's one of the strongest ways that we can actually help with greenhouse gas emissions. We want to focus on technology, not taxes. And so Canada can be the solution. We should also, as well, we have opportunity here for hydroelectric power. That doesn't exist in every country. We can also focus on tidal energy. And so there's a lot of things that we can do not only for ourselves here in Canada, but also to help other countries around the world as well.
Thank you. Stephen, do you believe carbon taxes are an effective way to reduce emissions?
The experts say it is. Every expert on the planet has said it was the most cost-effective way to do this, and unfortunately, 38 or 39% of the Conservative Party made so much noise about this that it became unpalatable. And so, you know, it doesn't mean that we're going to abandon it. It just means it's going to have to be applied in a different way. And you know, if you build this out, in the Conservative provinces that had the backstop, people were getting a check every month, or every quarter, I should say. That was more money than they were spending at the pumps. StatsCan's looked at this over and over and over. They're not going to get that check anymore, and they probably come to depend on that check. So we are where we are. It became a political football. Carney recognizes it as such, and he did what he had to do because of the politics. But we're not abandoning climate change for all the reasons everyone in this room thinks that we shouldn't.
Thank you. Trevor, to you, are you in favor of investing in clean energy alternatives?
I think yes, absolutely. Moreover, we have billions being provided in federal subsidies to the incredibly profitable oil and gas industry. I mean, all this is doing is padding their profits. Look, I mean, at the very least, we should be redirecting that funding towards building up our a just transition. We want a renewable energy industry in this country that can compete with the countries like China, for instance. You know, their government has pumped so much money into the development of EVs and developing low-cost solar panels, and we are behind because we are so tied in with the oil and gas industry, which is not the future. We rely on oil and gas, yes, that is without question. Do we need to wean ourselves off of it? Yes, absolutely. We need aggressive investment into renewable energy and to clean technologies.
Thank you. That was really just a lob for you, wasn't it, there?
Yeah. I feel like I got like a gift.
To you, Tracy, do you support implementing the National Pharmacare Program to provide universal prescription drug coverage?
One of the issues with that particular program is that the way that the legislation was written is there's a lot of concerns that it would actually supersede private programs. And so, the way that the legislation is written, it does talk about universal. There's concern for people that have private programs that have been negotiated into different contracts as well. And so there has to be a lot of caution with this so that does not eliminate the other private programs, which we heard a lot of concern about this when this originally came to Parliament, and I still have concerns on that matter as well. Thanks.
Thank you. Stephen, to you, do you support the expansion of Indigenous self-government and land rights?
I do.
The expansion of it?
Yeah, I do. From what it's currently at? Yes, I do.
Yeah.
Yeah, there's no answer.
Concise. Your turn again, Trevor. Do you believe that health care should remain publicly funded?
Yes.
It just timed it. It just came.
I mean, I guess I am a first-time candidate. This is like an effort not to scare me away, right? Yeah. I mean, of course. I mean, our public national healthcare system is really such a fundamental part of what makes Canada Canada. And if anything, we need to strengthen our public healthcare system. I mean, it doesn't go far enough. It's as simple as that. I mean, it's certainly better than a private insurance-driven system like we have to our, in our neighboring country to our south. And the last thing that we need is an Americanized, privatized healthcare system.
To you, Tracy, are you in favor of regular increases in the minimum wage, which reflect the changing cost of living?
Well, when you're looking at minimum wage, that would be provincial jurisdiction would be looking at that, and it's different in every region. So to say what those should be would be difficult because every region is different. You also need to look at how this affects small businesses in particular because they really can't absorb a lot of changes very quickly, and those are concerns that we've heard from the past. So I think that's something that there has to be discussions at the provincial level between the different industries that would be affected, and in particular the small businesses that would be affected by that.
Thank you. Stephen, last one before we get to our final statements tonight. Would you and your party support building an east-west gas oil pipeline?
Well, I've been listening to Mr. Carney very carefully on that particular issue. I think given where we're at right now and the severity of the situation that we're in, I think everything's on the table. Do I think it's going to be discussed? I do. I do think it's going to be discussed because of the situation with the states. We lost 33,000 jobs last month. There's 2 auto plants shut down in Ontario. This is just the tip of the iceberg. I think it would be naive to think that everything isn't on the table. We have to get through this. So, whether it'll materialize, I don't know. And what we put, I had a really interesting conversation with a professor that came to see me from Okanagan College, and he was very, very much against pipelines. So we had a chat for about half an hour, and he recognized the moment. He said, listen, if a pipeline's built, what you put down that pipeline will matter a lot. And I really listened to him. So I just want to reflect back on, I think everything's on the table right now, and we'll do what we have to do to get through the moment because it's a big one.
Thank you. Okay, so now it's time. I want to thank everybody for being so polite during the whole process. We're down to the final arguments phase. It's the reverse order from where we began. So, Stephen, 2 minutes as to why we should vote for you.
Okay, thank you very much. Thank you again for coming tonight. I guess it is tonight. Yeah, it's tonight already. We've been at this all day. This is a really important moment for our country. It's an all hands on deck moment. I don't see this as a party situation like conservative, liberal, NDP, Green. We have a clearly defined problem, and it is significant, and it could get really bad. I mean, right now it's just bad, but it has a potential to get bad. You watch the news, Donald Trump's completely out of control. And I would argue that he's even lawless right now if you've been watching the news. He's not listening to anybody. And it's very, very important that we get, of the 2 choices that we have that potentially could be our prime minister, the right guy for the job. Mark Carney, again, is a crisis manager. He's a world-renowned economist. He has been critically acclaimed by the opposition party, although the internet was around back then, so we can actually see it with our own eyes. They try and distance themselves from him. He really is the right guy for the job. And it's not only his credentials, he has the relationships. I mentioned earlier, politics is all about relationships. He knows Macron, he knows Stormer, he knows everybody over in Europe from his time over in Europe. This is critically important. We cannot get this wrong. If we get it wrong, everything that happens underneath that matters to us a lot, we'll just suffer. And back to that all politics is local thing, I think that's true. It'll matter probably a little less this time around, but we do need big infrastructure money moving forward. And I know how to do that. I've done it before, and I would be honored to do it again. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, it's your turn, Tracy. What's the 2-minute pitch? Why should we vote for you?
Well, thank you very much, and thank you everyone for being here today. The Liberals want you to forget the last 10 years. They have swapped out Justin Trudeau for his economic advisor, who has been his economic advisor for the last 5 years, during the time when your taxes increased, when we saw investment leave the country, when we saw increases in crime, when we saw increases in overdose deaths, and we saw investment leaving the country. $500 billion of investment. They want you to forget all of that. And now you have the Prime Minister who is the leader of the Liberal Party with all the same candidates, the same ministers, and really the same beliefs. And that's what the decision is. So what I would say is that we need a change. We need a dramatic change. If you want your taxes lowered, if you want less red tape and bureaucracy, if you want more opportunity for Canada, if you want more jobs for Canadians, if you want crime to go down, if you want mental health and addiction treatment and recovery to be a focus, if you want more opportunity, development of our natural resources so that we can get those around the world. If you want Canada to be more self-sustaining, then you need to vote Conservative. And on the local level here, it would be an honor to continue to serve the residents of Kelowna, and know that I will continue to work very hard. Our team and our community office works so hard to help residents here. We've done a lot of real good local initiatives. I'm out in the community a lot, and as I mentioned earlier, my goal is to be out and engaged in the community and bring the voices to Ottawa, bring the concerns to Ottawa in debates, in legislation, in policy, as I've done, and it would be an honor to continue to serve. Thank you very much.
Trevor, time for your 2-minute closer.
Well, what the NDP offers is unique. We are a party that holds governments to account. We keep them honest, and we hold them to their promises. And more than that, we are the only voice in the room that is centering the needs of hardworking families and marginalized people to make sure that they are not left behind, especially when we are looking at these existential threats, both economic and sovereign. We want to make sure that in our government's response to these things, that hardworking people, marginalized people, people living with disabilities, Indigenous people, are not left behind in the interests of trying to make numbers look good on the page. This is not the time for us to be pulling back on the work that needs to be done in terms of beefing up our social supports, our health care. We need to be investing in our people, especially when we're looking at the prospect of people losing their jobs. There's going to be downsizing across all kinds of industries in response to these tariffs. People are going to be thrown out of work. The NDP, we're here to make sure that anyone who loses their job is taken care of. Right? We want to expand eligibility for EI to include contract workers, gig workers. We want to make sure that universal programs are even stronger. Because when you lose your employer-provided benefits, you are out of the loop in many respects, and that is unacceptable. This is a time for us to be investing in our people. It's not just about trying to pursue some agenda of fiscal responsibility when people are suffering, and people are going to be suffering. And the NDP will make sure that whatever government is elected, we're going to keep them to their promises, and we're going to keep everyday people like you and I in the conversation.
Well, folks, that pretty much brings things to a close. I'd like to thank everybody for being so respectful. And I want to thank our candidates. I think they all did a great job. I also want to thank the Association of Interior Realtors for sponsoring this event. And I want to thank the Chamber especially for saving me when I got lost. And don't forget, voting day is April the 28th, and if you want to find out, it's confusing now with these changing boundaries, go to elections.ca for complete information on where and how to vote, and make sure you do.